All right. My name is Sean Gallagher. I'm an investigative reporter here at TMJ4 News. We are doing a Facebook Live to go over a pretty big story that we broke yesterday. We used the story from Chief Peter Hoell, former Germantown police chief, about the sexual abuse that he faced inside the Catholic Church as a teen. Obviously, a very heavy story, and just something that, it's scary. It's something that we've heard in the news in the past, but anytime you hear one of these stories, it doesn't get any easier to hear. We understand how heavy a topic this is, so we're pretty grateful that Chief Hoell decided to join us today, just to kind of dig a little bit deeper into this, not just the story that we aired yesterday, but also get a little behind the scenes, understand what he went through in talking to us about this, and maybe a little bit about our process as well. So joined by Chief Peter Hoell. He was Germantown police chief for 16 years, was with Germantown Police Department for over 3 decades. And he spent a good amount of time with me a couple months ago now for this interview, really just kind of being open, honest, vulnerable about something that's so personal. And then my right-hand man, Marty Hoell, he's a producer with us here at TMJ4 News for the I-Team. He really was the brains behind putting together what we did, a little bit different than what you might normally see on our air. We had like a 10, 11-minute package that aired just in its entirety on the website. That's not something we usually do. It was kind of his idea that, we didn't want to cut Chief Hoell short with these stories. You want to let the survivors speak their truth. You don't want to, cut things for time, which unfortunately TV does that to us. So I'm really grateful that Marty was able to join us too. He'll give us a little bit of insight as well. So I guess we're going to take a look at what the package looked like. But Chief Hoell, I mean, just before we even look at it, what's the last, day or two been like since we aired this story? Have you heard any feedback?
I've heard a lot of feedback. I thought the story was very well done. Like you said, a lot of time was put into it. You can tell that. And it really caught people's attention. I was hearing from people from Sheboygan, people I went to school with, community members, people I didn't even know were shooting me feedback, and they were really thankful that this discussion was brought up.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good to hear. I mean, that's, the purpose of us being in journalism is to try to have people kind of speak up and have these conversations. So we won't air the entire package right now, but we wanted to kind of give people who might be tuning in who didn't hear about this yesterday just an idea of, what this story was. So just first couple of minutes of the story right now.
It's a memory that won't leave him for the rest of his life. Even 40 years later, former Germantown Police Chief Peter Hoell vividly remembers what it was like when a Catholic priest molested him as a child here in Sheboygan. But now he's taking control, sharing his story, and hoping that others will feel confident in sharing theirs.
The first time I experienced it, I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. Dirty, disgusted, afraid. In hindsight, I should have told my parents, but I didn't.
After more than 40 years, retired Germantown Police Chief Peter Hoell is coming forward to tell his story about how he survived sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. Growing up in the Sheboygan area, he was an altar boy at Holy Name Parish.
I would also volunteer at bingo nights, and after bingo nights, the priest would allow us to go in the back and have a beer for our volunteering. And one beer led to another, to where we were intoxicated, and at that point when we were intoxicated, he would take advantage of us.
Hoell refuses to say the priest's name, but he's okay with us identifying him. Father William Effinger served as a priest at 4 different Wisconsin parishes. From 1960 to 1979, he moved from Kenosha to West Allis to Lake Geneva and finally to Sheboygan.
So yeah, obviously when we build a package like this, we want to use, the most powerful things that you had to say off the top, because, that's really what will get people to be engaged with a story like this. I mean, before we kind of get into how you felt during the whole process, how did you think of how we started that? Because, from my perspective, and Mark, you might want to chime in on this as well, we don't want to be too exploitive, just have the headline that really grabs somebody in. But I just thought that, those 3 words that you used, pretty disgusted, afraid. I mean, that I feel like that helps put somebody into the position that you felt as a teenager. What did you think about our use of that?
Exactly, because when you're a young person, and you're experiencing something you have no background in, you're not aware of, and then you don't know what to do. And a lot of times victims feel like they bring it upon themselves that they did something wrong, and that maybe someone won't believe them.
So I think too, to that same point, it can be easy to just dive into the gritty details, but I think what's more impactful and really what you've kind of brought to the forefront from the interview, from your social media presence, is just what it's like being a survivor after that, after the fact, just kind of what the process you go through. It's not just the moment it happens; it's so much more than that. Did you think that came across in the interview?
Yes, because with my experience in law enforcement, obviously I was involved in a number of sexual assault cases, and it impacted people in a variety of ways. Some people were so ridiculed as victims that they had to move from a different school, different community, different job because they weren't believed. And that you're just re-victimizing the victim. And that's why so many people are afraid to report these.
Yeah, and Chief Hoell, I think, one of the things that I wish we could have gotten more into in the TV story was just the idea of how much this impacted your professional life in a positive way. I mean, the one part of our interview that I really liked was, you answered the hard questions about how this has impacted you, but I mean, you said something along the lines of like, I'm going glass half full. I'm going to make this a positive. I mean, if you can, I mean, in what ways did this impact how you policed?
I think it made my investigations better. Obviously, if someone is claiming to be a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, we have to vet that very seriously because that's a very serious claim. And I know what that's like to be afraid of that and not want to do that. And then I also have the experience of seeing those victims re-victimized where people don't believe them or they, like I just said, they have to leave their schools or work or whatever.
Yeah. So, we spent, I mean, even before the interview, you and I grabbed coffee up in Germantown area, and we spent probably like an hour then. And then the interview was probably over an hour as well, just, kind of going through this very sensitive and emotional thing for you. But, I mean, overall, what was that experience like for you to be able to you made a post on Facebook originally, and you have your people that saw that, but I would assume you thought, the media is going to reach out to you at some point because this is such a groundbreaking thing.
Actually, I didn't. I have the retired Facebook page, retired Chief Hoell Facebook page, and I have a variety of content in there. And that particular post was about sexual assault and providing people resources and where they can go to. And it was one sentence that I said that something to the effect that I knew what it was like because I was a victim myself.
Yeah. And then, when we grabbed coffee and, this should make you feel good. A comment from Laura just saying that you're an amazing person, both as an officer and person of the community. And now I guess that you probably know who this is, just saying how proud she is of you for speaking up on this and that you're not alone. Everybody's here for you. I mean, I think that was kind of a point you wanted to make as well, was that you were hoping that, the teens that unfortunately are maybe going through this right now, you didn't want them to feel alone.
Exactly. And, if we touch on what the predator is like, this isn't the old someone jumping out of the bushes raping something. That does happen. But most sexual assaults are done by people in authority or known to the family, whether it be a father, mother. In my example, it was a priest. You have teachers, bosses, people in authority that they'll use that authority over their victim to victimize them. And you see that on TV quite often in these high profile cases.
Yeah.
But when you're a young child and it's a teacher, that's very intimidating.
Yeah. I mean, how do you speak up about that when, most of us are raised to like respect authority and like put all our trust in that? How do you kind of speak up about it? Yeah. So, when we were talking about this too, you said like how, like you still had a pit in your stomach and it's 40 years later. I mean, how hard is it still to talk about this?
It's hard right now because I'm just bringing it up, reliving it. But for me personally, I'm at peace with it. And I want to talk about it to help people, because obviously having that 31 years of service to people, that just doesn't go away when I retire. And that's why I started a Facebook page, was to do my part that I could. It's all voluntary. I don't get anything for it. I just try to help the community because I have some time to do that.
Marty, I kind of want to get your perspective too, because Marty goes over like every draft that I do. Again, I said like I depend on him very heavily in this job, and I thank him for that. But when you first went over this script, obviously you knew what the content was, so you kind of knew what you were getting into. I'd imagine that it was going to be pretty heavy. But I mean, what were your first takeaways? Because I think that first script I sent you, it was several pages long.
Yeah, the thing you should know about Sean is his first drafts are usually mini novels on any story he does. But this one really stuck out. And, I've been on this team a little bit longer than Sean, but with Sean and other reporters, we've worked on stories involving survivors of sexual assaults. And the thing that I found just going over those stories was you have to let the person talk. And that means you have to let, it's like an industry term, we say, let it breathe. Not necessarily to one, to be engaging with the viewer, but two, to kind of help the viewer understand what it truly is like. And as I saw, his interview log that you guys did it back in November, December, and I saw the first script, I kind of told him, I'm like, there's no way we can get the script on air, but the story needs to be told in some form, and more than just kind of writing it into the copy version on our website. So something we'd kind of kicked around for a while was kind of having these extended stories, packages we call them, and I just kind of wanted him to lean into it a little bit. It takes a little bit of work, it's why I kind of took from about 2 months to put it together, because we're essentially doing two separate stories, one for the broadcast version and one for the digital version. But I was really happy with how both turned out, and I hope you feel like we did your voice some justice and allowed you to kind of speak your truth, as Sean said.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because I know.
So I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
There's one thing I kind of was thinking as I went through that process was, we did a lot we talked a lot about delayed disclosure with a couple of groups. Obviously you have your lived experience, but was that something you were kind of aware of in your law enforcement, or just as a survivor that was something other people went through, that delayed disclosure?
Yeah, and that's what helped me with my experience in law enforcement, that I knew that was very logical, possible, that someone may take 5 years, 10 years to report it, because they just, for whatever reason, don't have the courage, don't know what to do, feel lost, or all of a sudden there's an epiphany that, I have to report this thing.
Yeah, and understanding that, we wanted to tell your story, but I think Marty and I, a big thing that we like to do is to not just present that, this is an issue that happened and it's an issue that's ongoing, but we want to provide a solution. We tried to bring in the resources that are out there, understanding that Attorney General Josh Call has opened up a newish investigation. I think it's almost a year old now, to try to get more people to do what you're doing and speak out about this. I mean, when we bring in things like that, I mean, did you feel like we overshadowed your story by any means, or do you hope that people need or can see these resources for themselves?
No, actually, I was very impressed by that. I think that was very important that people saw that law enforcement and other entities are taking this topic very seriously. And my point was just to help out with that as a voice.
Yeah. And then another part too that I found interesting when we were talking, that I don't know that we really got into the story, is like, you're still a really spiritual person, and you have your issues with what happened, but by any means, do you think that this story came across as like an indictment of the Catholic Church or anything like that?
I don't think so. The response from the Catholic Church, I thought, was disappointing, but I expected it. But yes, I am a very faithful person. I have my own way of praying. I do it often, and serving man, community. And that's the way I live my life, God-fearing man.
Yeah. And I know we posted some stuff yesterday and it's in the story, but what do you say now? I mean, do you feel good that you did this? And do you feel like, you did what you could from a small Facebook post to what we're doing now?
I feel very good. It's almost like a sense of relief that I didn't expect this to be that effective. I knew people would watch the story, but I didn't think I would get this reaction that we got from the story.
Do you think it's kind of part of, it's different for different people, but for you, do you think it's kind of part of your healing journey, even being removed from it this long?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting it out there, talking about it. One of my thoughts was, okay, this guy was the chief of police, and here's a person of authority who had that happen to him. And he has the, I guess, bravery, for lack of a better words, to come forward and not feel embarrassed about it. Yes, I'm the chief of police, law enforcement of 31 years, but I was a victim and I'm not embarrassed about it. I don't think I handled it correctly. And that's another point I want to make is don't do what I did.
Yeah. It's such a struggle too. Cause I know, like you were saying, from your policing perspective, like everybody goes at their own speed too. You can't pull something out of somebody, but it's good to, have other people learn from you. I'd imagine that's kind of the ultimate goal. Another comment that we just put up here from Amy. She's Catholic and very proud of you for speaking up. You're helping others in understanding. So, I mean, is that have you had backlash from people who are religious that say kind of try to blow past this, or is it mostly support that you get?
Yeah, I haven't had a single piece of backlash at all. And quite honestly, I was expecting it because, again, being in law enforcement, we got a lot of backlash. And when we investigate certain cases, certain high-profile cases, we would get backlash because the person was a prominent member of the community. And they thought maybe that the police department was railroading this great person and that the victim was lying. So, I'm very, very used to backlash, and I didn't get any on this case, or on this story, I should say.
Sure. So just as a heads up, anybody that's tuning in now, we're talking with former Germantown police chief Peter Hoell. He had a very raw and open interview with us about the sexual abuse he faced as a child in the Catholic Church, hoping to share his story to encourage others to come out there and speak their own truth, and maybe hold those people accountable who have offended others. So I guess before we wrap up here, and if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the chat now. We'll try to get them answered as best we can. But I've had cameras pointed at you for the better part of a month now. Why don't we flip the roles? Did you have any questions for me and Marty about our process, what we did with your story, or anything related to this?
Not so much the process, because I think it was very well done. Maybe just your thoughts and feelings about the impact you've had on bringing this subject forward.
Yeah, I think this is kind of, I may have said this earlier, but almost the reason that we get into this job. We want to, hold people accountable and also help people who are suffering have an outlet. And I think, your story, unfortunately, is one of many that we cover over the years. I know Marty had talked just earlier about talking to survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, all these serious things. And it can be a lot to shoulder, when we took a while to put the story together, but it's because Marty and I were really careful about the words we use, the videos that are used. We had other edits of this story over the process where we said, I don't know if we should use that shot there because we don't want to be triggering to other people who are out there, who may hear the words that we're saying and see the video that goes with it. And it can, bring up those feelings in a negative way. We want them to feel empowered to come forward and speak on it. So it's something that every time we cover a story of this magnitude, we know how heavy this is. And we know we have a responsibility to tell your story appropriately, and we don't let you down and any other victim that could be, or survivor really, who is dealing with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add too, this is just kind of a topic we always seem to come back to. I actually have a story today regarding kind of a check-in with after there was a backlog of sexual assault kits, just kind of where we're at, a few years removed with that. And it's just, the more you do it, the more you realize how powerful people's voices are. I think sometimes because of the nature of our work, we dive into data and public records, and it's very dense, but at the end of the day, those stories matter, but giving people a voice and using our megaphone to kind of help people like yourself and people who are watching it, who may be experiencing these things, understand, one, they're not alone, and two, there's help out there. I think those are some of the most fulfilling parts of the job.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to leave before, did you have any other questions, Chief?
I do not, no.
All right, cool. So one other thing that I just wanted to, I'm going to try to share my screen, is I just want to make sure everybody who tunes in now or at another time can make sure that they, if they do feel like they need help or they want to contact anybody, is to just reach out to the Wisconsin DOJ and their clergy and faith leader abuse. Can you guys see this on the screen or no?
No, I just see the tmj4.com banner.
Okay. I'll give the number that you can call. It's 1-877-222-2620. But there's also a website, just supportsurvivors.widoj.gov. You can report anonymously there, and you don't need to give your name or your info if you don't want to, but somebody from the DOJ would contact you to try to learn more, whether this is something that happened recently or even if it's, 50, 60 years old. They want to hear from everybody so that they can get a full picture of what this is like, because we know that the Catholic Church does have their list of restricted priests and people who have they've had their clerical titles stripped because they've been found guilty for this, but the DOJ just wants to double, triple check to make sure that we know who has done this. So if this has happened to you, hopefully Chief Hoell's story can encourage you to come forward, whether you're currently a teen or if you're 80 years old. Everybody matters, and we want to hear from the DOJ wants to hear from everybody. So. Really appreciate you guys coming on for this quick conversation. And if anybody else have any questions or anything they wanted to add? Doesn't sound like it. All right, cool. Well, thank you both and everybody who watched. And feel free to follow the link or look for the full story on our website.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Chief.
You bet. My pleasure.